You said don't use AI, build AI. How do you teach people to build AI?
And I think that is a culture shift. One thing I learned very hard way probably is that culture beats everything. To me, the biggest thing is the mindset of curiosity. I think that drives the urge or the inspiration for being innovative.
Being right is the enemy of staying right. Because you've made those decisions in the past, it's worked for you. It may not work in today's context.
One big thing I would say for leaders is that it is actually okay to go do things without seeking permission and actually say, yes, we've done this and here is how it looks and here is how it makes a difference.
If you had to set up a GCC today from ground zero, who are the first three people you would employ?
One, solid engineering leaders, who can make things work. Number two is supreme technologists who can build systems globally. And number three, a great person who can drive culture.
Number four, Zinnov.
Right. We need the ecosystem too. Yeah. Right?
Welcome to this episode of Zinnov's GCC Unfiltered. Whether you're leading a GCC, building one, or are just plain curious, we bring you the real insights that matter. This isn't just about buzzwords or trends, but it's about the trade-offs, the pivotal moments, and the strategies that drive long-lasting value. We dive into the challenges of the leaders, the change in their mindsets, and the tough decisions that they've had to make to drive the future of their organizations. I'm Nitika Goel, CMO and Managing Partner at Zinnov, and I'm joined by an old friend, Deepak Visweswaraiah, who's the SVP and a Managing Director at Pega India. I've had the privilege of working with Deepak in the past, and I now call him a friend and a mentor, and I continue to learn from him today. Deepak has been instrumental in leading Pega's transformation in India, taking its center from a support function to a key driver of AI innovation and, of course, digital transformation. A deep believer in setting the culture right, thinking from an innovation-first lens, Deepak is all about getting into the trenches and doing it from the grounds up. His journey has been one of scaling operations, pushing the boundaries of technology, and building high-performing teams. Today, we'll explore what he did in the past and what he continues to do to make every organization that he's been a part of successful in their GCC journey. So thank you so much, Deepak, for being here today. Really excited to have you on the show.
Thank you, Nitika. Always a pleasure to spend some time with you. And this is really a good opportunity to be here. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. I wanted a quick, like a 30-second thing of what Pega does, because that's what we're going to feed into here.
Well, Pega is an AI-driven, an AI-powered platform that drives, enterprise transformation, if you will. Pega allows our customers to actually, excel in three different areas, right? Whether it is customer engagement, customer service in terms of any contact center type of scenarios, or intelligent automation, any business process that can be automated. So, at a very high level, that's really what, Pega does for that matter.
Absolutely. Deepak, the reason we call it GCC Unfiltered is I think there are a lot of conversations, there's a lot of hype around GCCs as we know it today, but I'd love to hear from you. What do you think is hype and what do you think is reality?
What has actually happened in terms of the growth of GCCs in India, especially over the last 5 to 7 years probably, has enormously, grown. And then that growth and even the rate of growth, if you see, has caused a sensation in the country that GCC is now actually becoming a segment that people are actually starting to focus on. I think it's India's, uniquely placed to be able to host all of this because of the talent we have, because of the space we have, because of the technology adoption and then the language capabilities, all of that coming together. I think that's what is making it so special, right? The hype is always there in terms of, from a market perspective and from a media perspective or what have you. But I think the value is what is more important as global companies start to put their own centers here, which traditionally goes away from typical services mindset to building products.
Yeah.
I think it makes a huge difference. That's what separates the hype.
So I think you brought in a very interesting dimension of value, right? Like I said, I've had the pleasure of working with Deepak for multiple years. You've worked with EMC, you've worked with NetApp, and today with Pega. How have the value levers changed in this case?
I think the value levers have changed from multiple perspectives, right? I think it has changed from both inside as well as outside. Right? From inside, I think we have actually have had people who have grown with this evolution. So there's a lot more leadership capability today in India to be able to lead such centers, such products, what have you, across the board. And that is one thing that gives the capability for companies to set up a GCC with the right leadership capabilities. I think what is also changed is the outside in look as far as the global, leaders who want to set up, they understand the value of what a India center can actually bring to the market or bring to them. It is not about cost anymore. I think people have learned that over the last 20 years. There is a lot about the value in terms of how can you be critical to the business.
I'm going to ask you a hard question here, right? Do you
Sure.
think Indian leaders are actually ready to be a part of that critical workflow? Do we really understand the top 3 CEO priorities?
I would probably say yes or no, right? I think yes, in the sense that there are certainly in pockets. It is not uniform. I'll certainly say it is not uniform and across the board. And a critical change is also about thinking, this is not about, a center that is has a separate agenda from an India perspective or something. I mean, typically, if you look at the whole mindset of that leadership role that we're talking about, it is to understand what are the company's goals and how do you align to the company strategies? How do you understand what are the CEO's imperatives? How do you take your entire center that, at scale that you have, which typically is never there anywhere else? And I think that's the biggest, that's the beauty of it is, I would say is to be able to take that scale and direct it to generating that value, and then the leadership being able to understand that. Yeah, not everyone is there. Is there room to do more? Most definitely there is. And I think we're in a transitional phase. We are halfway there probably. And I think, we'll look to continue, that to see more of that.
What do you think the ecosystem needs, Deepak, to be able to get the ones that are not there yet to sort of move up that chain?
Yeah, I think this is where companies like Zinnov play a huge role and have played a role over the last couple of decades. I remember myself actually working with this ecosystem now for 15, 20 years along with you guys. And, it's been a phenomenal journey. I don't think there is any other country that offers an ecosystem like we have, to be able to learn from each other, to be able to really, in terms of don't have to make the same mistakes that people have already made. And you can actually leapfrog in terms of how you actually set up an R&D center now, or how you set up a GCC now, and what kind of things would you focus on, and how do you go about doing that? And I think the infrastructure, the all the other parts that are coming to, I think the talent that is available in the country has actually consistently improved. And, and then our ability to be able to, let's say, jump on the AI bandwagon, in terms of everything that's going on in the world, has been phenomenal. And I think those things give us that edge.
Do you think as an ecosystem, because we've become a little bit of our own echo chamber, there's so much hype around it, that there's a little bit of hubris that's set in?
There is always that concern, especially when it starts going at that rate of growth, right? So there is also an element of whether the global leadership in an organization will allow that to set in, versus actually, So like, for example, at Pega, we have our CEO coming in every year. We have our chief product officer coming in every year. Most of the executives actually come in and spend time. And so they understand in terms of how it works, right? So that helps to prevent something like that.
Are we also sometimes getting very caught up in labels? Because like, are you a GCC, not a GCC? Are you a center of excellence? Are you not a COE? Does that have like a plus or a minus as we go through the process?
Personally, I don't give much of an importance to the label in terms of what we call it. Yes, we have actually gone from calling ourselves a COE to a GCC to whatever else,
We've gone through a lot of GIC, everything.
Exactly.
Yes,
yeah. So, to that end, I don't think labels should matter. I think what actually matters is, what perspectives do global corporations carry? One of the things that that things have actually helped during this evolution is moving away from that whole notion of being a back office, and that people had this notion of the talent in India prefers or experts at cost management, or the whole cost arbitrage thing, right? I think it is very clear now that Indians really value all the impact that they actually create from a global perspective. I think that's what actually inspires them to do better. And that's what I think the global leaders understand now. And that shift is actually changed. And to some extent, these labels may help, along that transitional, path in that sense.
In a company like Pega, for example, you do have a lot of global stakeholder buy-in. You yourself have grown into a global SVP position. What is the line between an HQ as well as an India GCC? We keep hearing the word today as an integrated GCC, where you are a center in India. GCC is just like a common phrase to sort of group together this collective. But how has that line sort of either been drawn deeper in sand or completely dematerialized, if you will?
Yeah, actually, at Pega particularly, right, we have completely pretty much eliminated that line. We don't talk about India per se, right? It is the global outlook of what works for Pega and what is important for Pega, and are we doing everything from a Pega perspective? In Pega, we call that as a one Pega mindset, right? A very simple concept of how we're all working for Pega, for that matter. There is nothing specific to a particular site or a particular region or something like that, but everything is focused around our overall strategy. And I think that is important for GCCs as such, in terms of to grow in that value chain. That is when you're going to start making decisions that will impact the company at a global level. And I think that is, when you start making that happen, I think that is when you will start showing the true value at a company level, right? When you start being in front of the boards, when you're actually starting making those decisions for your CXO, players, what have you, gravitated towards that model of being able to really, look at India or any other center as part of the overall global organization, but it just so happens to be in a location, right? And then for us, the advantage is the scale. I don't think there is any other country where similar scale of talent is present. So for us, it gives a little bit more of an edge where you can actually have a microcosm of a company. And so you can actually interact and get things done very quickly.
So Deepak, you've been in a position where obviously today you have a leadership that is mature enough globally that understands the value of the India Center. But you've been in a position where you've gone through the journey,
yes,
right? So if you had to give anybody some advice, or companies that are currently traversing through the journey you've already been on, how should they build the business case? And one feedback we keep hearing is that while the ideas may be really good, does it truly impact either the top line or the bottom line significantly, right? There's so much noise. So how do they prioritize that? Is there anything that you have specific inputs based on your own learning and life lessons?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of the things. One thing I learned very hard way probably is that culture beats everything. And I think the first thing is about being able to build the culture right. You may actually have 2,000 people, 5,000 people, 10,000 people center here, but can you actually have the right culture to be able to drive that kind of innovation or that kind of ideation, what have you, to be able to make an impact, right? One big thing I would say for leaders is that it is actually okay to go do things without seeking permission and actually say, yes, we've done this and here is how it looks and here is how it makes a difference. I think having the business acumen to determine whether something is valid, globally, whether something would actually have a global impact, is a huge difference today. It's not just being technically great about a product or a technology. I think it is also about being able to understand the market and understand the customers to be able to actually go and make that difference. Today, we act, just because of the GCC presence in India, we also have access to a lot more customers than we ever had
before. Correct, yes.
Right, and that has actually made a difference. The flip side of it, I would also say, one of the bigger learnings is to teach the global leaders what they need to expect or what they need to do. One of my lessons to the global leaders is actually, if you want to see value coming out of, your center, you can't just say, oh, yes, we also have a center in India. That's not going to, work. If you are sitting somewhere 8,000 miles across and say, I have a center in India, it doesn't work. You need to invest time and you need to be on the ground. You need to actually make yourself, your presence felt with the teams who are working on.
We used to hear in the past that we were very good instruction takers or order takers, not necessarily thinkers. I think we've evolved through that cycle. Right. We were not very articulate in terms of being able to talk about what we were doing in a more succinct manner. Right. And seeing what is most relevant. I think we've conquered all of that. The big thing that I keep hearing now is systems thinking. A lot of individuals, leaders, technologists here think about their product or their information in a silo, not really looking at the overall impact to organization, customer, and how that comes into play. If you have to do the systems thinking lever, what do you think we need to do as an ecosystem to be able to drive that ahead and effectively?
Yeah, I think the first thing probably in that context is to be able to have those people who have that kind of an exposure, in the sense that it predominantly requires individual contributors who are at a very high senior technical level, which was one thing that we lacked for years. That has actually been a Achilles heel, because at one point in time everybody wanted to become managers in India. Nobody wanted to grow in the technical ladder, or most companies didn't even have a technical ladder here that actually gave an opportunity, which has changed over the last few years. Now you will see there is a technical ladder that people grow. Now we have had for the last 15, 20 years people growing in that ladder who understand that level of system thinking, as far as global systems that are built at scale. How does that work at scale? How does that how is it resilient? How is it secure? How do you build such systems, right? That's also leadership. In a lot of ways, it is very similar to, let's say, an engineering leader who may be driving a product. This same person is driving such architecture globally. Today, you have people at, whether director, senior director, VP levels, who are focused individual contributors who lead such design and architectures of systems. What we need is that level of understanding. People who are at CTO levels, people who are at CIO levels, people who have actually done that in terms of in various ways and means to bring that capability to the rest of the organization, right? That's predominantly, I think, is what is required to be able to build such systems. And the knowledge of the technology is fine. People will learn. We figure that out pretty easily. but it is that expertise of right, how you get that all together and be able to serve a customer need, I think is important.
I think that's a great point, right? And as we think about systems, you also talked about one dimension of critical mass, right? You said India has critical mass. In some ways, sometimes when you're very large, in many cases, it's 50% of the engineering org. Sometimes it's up to 70% of the engineering org. How do you prevent India GCC from becoming a silo in itself, where everything, so the center of gravity, if you will, not necessarily decision making, but everything else moves to India. So how do you prevent just human tendency of making it a silo because it's just what it is?
Yeah, simply because you can.
Exactly,
right? I would tell I am actually looking at that right now and it consciously making sure that we don't actually do something like that, right? 50-60% of our product engineering happens here in India. And it is very easy to fall into that trap in terms of, I have everything, so I can just do whatever I want to do. I think that the biggest, that would be a big mistake in my opinion if we start doing that. We need to make sure that we break the silos. I'll give you a very good example that we often use in the AI world, in the agentic AI world, right? Everyone talks about these agents, AI agents, and typically in our in our thinking, especially in a Pega perspective, is that every AI agent works pretty much in a silo.
Yeah,
right? They are independent agents. They are supposed to perform some tasks, especially if they are a prompt-driven, agent. You even if you give the same prompt 3 different times, depending on where it is operating and what it is doing, it may give you 3 different answers. That's not what you want. Right? You want these agents to be predictable. If you ask that same question 10 times, you want the same answer, right? And how does that come? That comes, with the context of the overall process or the overall product or the overall use case that you're actually building the system for. And there may be multiple agents operating in that, right? And if there are multiple agents operating in a system and each one doing its own thing, especially, let's say, for example, if they're trying to play music, all you would hear is a cacophony of,
agents.
Agents, exactly. And, that's not going to be helpful for any organization. I think we have to watch for, and then intentionally make sure that we are aligned from a company overall organization perspective in terms of the strategies that we are working on, and then we are aligned to be able to drive goals. That is why it is important to not drive separate channels to go figure out, okay, what is the charter for my group in India versus here is the charter for Pega and where do I fit in that charter.
No, I think that's such a great point and such a great example. I think you talked about the fact that leaders need to understand what the business context is, understand the global leader mindset, and then contextualize that to be able to drive outcomes. In the construct of AI, where global teams don't know what they're doing, customers are still exploring where they want to go to. Everybody's willing to put in a POC, but not enough to say, let's commit to this outcome because it's changing so fast. In this case, what role can an India center or a GCC, just because we know it's a group, play?
Well, I think fundamentally, even though, yes, the technology is still changing and it is still at a nascent, stage from an overall perspective, but the progress it has made in such a short duration, I think is what makes everybody's eyes, open up and having to do something. And I think this whole fear of missing out in a way that or what is now, I guess everybody's using the fear of becoming obsolete or what have you, is driving, towards being ready for it. And what do the GCCs do, or what do these kind of organizations do? I think the biggest thing we can do is to get our talent ready, right? And when I say talent ready, it is not about being able to just leverage AI. It's actually about building AI in the context of actually understanding the business. It's not about, I'm going to ask this question to ChatGPT, but it's really about what I was talking about earlier, right? How do you leverage, AI agents to actually perform a task that it understands human, elements, human emotions,
and context.
And then the biggest part of it is context. And then how do you execute something, based on that, right? And then, if there is an agent that's answering a call, how does it understand the empathy of, a person who is on, right? Whether the person is angry, whether the person is, how do you really get that understanding, right? So going back to your question, I think it's all about getting the talent ready.
So Deepak, I think you brought in a great point and perspective before this, saying that Indian centers and GCCs need to understand what the global leaders are thinking, the global customer context, the systems thinking to be able to drive outcomes. One of the key things, however, in today's context is the fact that even global leaders don't know what to bet on, given how dynamic AI is. India leaders are working on a bunch of Gen AI use cases and getting caught up in that noise. So customers themselves don't know what they truly want with AI because the goalposts keep shifting. In that context, how do GCCs really prioritize what to do and make or take meaningful bets to drive the AI agenda of any organization ahead?
Yeah, I think a couple of things, right? As you said, because the technology is moving so much, and then it is changing every day, to that end. I think one of the things is, for companies to figure out how can they, train their talent and then have the talent be ready to be AI native. When I say AI native, it is not just about how do I use AI, it's about how do I build AI, to do the right things. Because that is actually important to get the broader context and to make things work, within a short time frame. I think that the biggest difference from what we used to do versus what we do now is how can you do things bigger, better, faster, quicker, with better quality, right? All of those things, because you're leveraging AI to be able to do a bunch of things that you would otherwise, not do. I think it is important to make sure that irrespective of, what type of people they may have. So you will actually have people in finance, in HR, in every other function, right? And how do people look to leverage these things to do their jobs better? I think it is also important. Now, you said, things are changing globally, but at the same time, are there things that are, fruitful in nature? We have actually had customers who have already gone, production with some of the features, functionalities we've already built in. Right, things like whether it is a Pega blueprint, which essentially is a design agent to be able to design application, workflow applications, is being very, very widely used now by all of our customers, for that matter. And anyone, they don't even have to be a customer to actually try it out. What have you? Similarly, whether it is something called as we have a knowledge agent called a knowledge buddy, which is, in production in multiple places, for that matter. So a lot of those things are already starting to be in production. While things are changing, yes. Are customers willing to try these out? Absolutely, they are. Are they, realizing, some of the benefits of leveraging, being in the leading edge of implementing some of these things? Absolutely, right? That's what gives the encouragement to actually go and become AI native, so that you can do things much better.
So Deepak, you brought in a really interesting perspective. You said, don't use AI, build AI. How do you teach people to build AI?
Well, that is not easy, right? And I think that is a culture shift. We've been using AI for a long time, for about 10, 12 years, especially in a decisioning product, in terms of how do you make real-time decisions and, what have you. And for us, it was reasonably an easier transition. And the biggest important thing, in terms of what you're asking is, how do you not just bolt on things, into your product just because you want to use it? How do you build it into the product in the right way so that it is ubiquitously available for all of the users of the product, especially in a platform concept? If you're building a platform, you build that into the platform so that anything or any application or anything that uses your platform actually has access to what you do. So when you start your employees, when you start your talent to start thinking of how do you build that in, you have no other way other than being AI native to actually do that. Secondly, I think you have to go on a leadership drive across the company to really set goals of how do you get that to your employees. We've had a worldwide goal, the overall at a company level, to drive that, not only just about driving efficiency, but driving that mindset of, everyone has an opportunity to use. And, in fact, we actually have manager dashboards that shows how much of your team is actually leveraging AI, how much of your team is using AI in their everyday life, for that matter, right? It tells a manager in terms of where you are, in your journey as such, as far as taking your team along. So it is important to build that culture, and it doesn't come unless the leadership believes that this is something that needs to be done, and this is one thing I would say, it would have to be top down, and so that people actually trust, believe, and then actually start learning it.
That's a great point, right? And you say it starts top down. Also, I want to ask how that extends really to customers. I know you manage a lot of your customers from out of India. I think that's a unique flip that we see. I think the earlier days we always used to hear we cannot have product managers in India because the customers are located elsewhere. You manage a large chunk of the Pega customers from India. Right. How do you build that same culture of learnability, understanding, usability of AI, and extend that to your customers as well?
That's a very interesting question for me. For us, it actually, the flip happened about a couple of years ago. For us, one of the advantages is that we work with the world's largest enterprises. And there are a few 200, 250 very large enterprises that we work with. And guess what? Most of them actually have their own R&D centers here. They have their, Pega practices here, and they build applications. It was an eye-opener for us. And we started developing those relationships. Not only did we find that they actually built Pega applications here, but we actually started seeing their leadership roles have also completely developed out of here.
Yeah, wow.
And now there are people who are either influencers or decision makers who are actually sitting here for our technology stack, in those customer organizations. So, which is a phenomenal thing to have.
Correct.
Then we started really engaging, with these customers to be able to talk to them about, okay, what new stuff are we working on? What are some of the new things? Why should they actually be using some of these new things? And what are the, possibilities of, how they could, I don't know how we would solve some of their challenges as well. And that actually opened up in terms of bi-directional exchange, that we would actually have. Now, there isn't a week that goes by that we have one of these customers in our office, and then having those conversations, for that matter, right? And for our talent, our senior engineering leaders, the technology leaders, the architects, to be able to have this opportunity to directly, listen from customers, to be able to actually share what they have actually done, with these people and what have you. It was phenomenal.
Unbelievable. So we're going to get into a rapid fire section. If you know what that means, I'm going to ask you a set of questions. Hopefully some of them will make you uncomfortable or make you think. But quick answers, anything that you think just comes to the top of your head, right? So what is the one hard truth you've encountered about GCCs that no one talks about?
Well, everything is rosy and everything is great. Most people are afraid to talk about, what's not so good. But I think that's the best part to establish global relationships.
If the GCC model didn't exist tomorrow, what would break at Pega?
Oh, everything. I think the biggest thing is the talent that we have, the engineering talent we have. We do 50-60% of our product engineering out of India. So it would be a big thing for us.
So good luck to your customers then, right? If India didn't exist. You've seen the good, the bad, the ugly of GCCs. What advice would you give your 10-year younger self for this?
Running behind headcount is not what I would advise anybody. It's running behind the value and the business impact you can create is what is going to set us apart and make a difference in terms of what we would set up. That's what I would focus on.
If you had to set up a GCC today from ground zero, who are the first 3 people you would employ? You don't have to give me names, but the types of roles that they would play.
One, solid engineering leaders, who can make things work. Number 2 is the supreme technologists who can build systems globally. And number 3, a great person who can drive culture. And those are probably 3 that I would look for.
Number 4, Zinnov.
Right. We need the ecosystem too.
Yeah.
Right?
So we'll plug the ecosystem. No, I was just kidding. But if you had to do culture building, like on ground zero, on the assumption that you don't have a great culture to start with, what would be the top few things that you would take on a war footing?
To me, the biggest thing is the mindset of curiosity. I think that drives the urge or the inspiration for being innovative. Number 2, I would say defining who you are and then building that culture is as important as anything else you do. I often say, culture probably eats strategy for breakfast and
lunch and dinner.
Else.
Yes.
Yeah, and so it is that important in that sense. How do you build those ambassadors to start with? I would even, like you remember the 3 people that I would hire, I would probably hire the culturist first. They are the ones who are going to have to champion your culture and then build on the rest.
Got it. You've been in the ecosystem through the years, right? It's hard not to get jaded. And how do you keep yourself new, relevant, and do not succumb to fatigue? I'm asking you unfiltered questions, Deepak. I'm sorry, it's called Unfiltered.
As long as I'm enjoying what I'm doing, I think that's the primary thing in my, even when I talk to people who are working on our technology or working on the products and doing everything, it is so interesting. What more can you ask for?
So I was recently reading something which is very interesting. Sometimes being right is the enemy of staying right. Because you've made those decisions in the past, it's worked for you. It may not work in today's context. So as a leader who's experienced so much, and today you're dealing with a completely AI native team, a set of mindsets completely fresh. Yeah. So how do you stay relevant in that context?
That's a great. It's very easy to kind of preach, to continuous learning and then skill yourself and do all that. That is important to everyone. Not necessarily that I have to actually go and sit and code something at this point in time in my career or what have you, but it is very important to know the right things in terms of what were the right questions to ask. What is this technology doing to us, and how do I figure out a strategy? I may not even have all the answers, but do I have the right questions to ask?
Finally, what does unfiltered success look for you at a Pega level and at a personal level in the next 3 years?
Well, at a Pega level, I think the unfiltered success is the fact that, we are where we are in the evolution and, our vision of being a critical business driver while being a great place to work. That's kind of the vision. Personally, I don't know, just find some time to play golf, I think will be nice.
I think all your friends will be very happy about that. Great. Thank you once again, Deepak, for being on this episode of Zinnov's GCC Unfiltered. I loved having this conversation with you. It really does feel like speaking to a mentor and friend. Every conversation is a learning conversation, and thank you once again.
Thank you so much. As I've always said, it's an incredible pleasure to be here, especially with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deepak.